Welcome back to the deep dive. We're switching gears a bit this time around and heading straight into ancient Egypt.
And, might I add, a figure who's shrouded in as much mystery as the pyramids themselves.
You've got that right. We're tackling Cleopatra this time.
Oh, and trust me, there are going to be some serious aha moments for our listeners today.
I'm excited to get into it. Now I've got our trusty Wikipedia page fired up and ready to go. Is that what we're using as our source today?
It sure is. We'll be navigating through its depths to uncover a side of Cleopatra that often gets buried beneath the romance and the drama.
And let's be real, there's a lot of that when it comes to Cleopatra. But I have a feeling this deep dive is going to challenge some preconceived notions. I'm ready when you are.
Buckle up, because we're about to see Cleopatra not just as a queen of Egypt, but as a strategic genius, a master communicator, and quite the icon.
Let's dive in. Where do we even begin with someone like Cleopatra? Her story seems larger than life.
You know, it's fascinating, because a lot of people don't realize that one of Cleopatra's greatest strengths lay in her language skills.
Really? You mean besides her obvious charm and, well, those legendary romances?
I'm talking pure linguistic talent. Unlike her predecessors on the Ptolemaic throne who were content with just Greek, Cleopatra made it a point to learn Egyptian.
Wow, I never knew that. To rule a kingdom and not even speak the language of the people, that's almost unimaginable.
It really makes you think about the power dynamics at play. Now, imagine Cleopatra being able to address her Egyptian subjects in their own language.
Now that would have been a game changer. Talk about making a statement and connecting with the people you rule.
Absolutely. This wasn't just about practicality, though it certainly was practical. It was a brilliant move in terms of cultural diplomacy. She was basically saying, I see you, I respect your culture. And that gave her a significant edge, especially later on when dealing with you-know-who.
The Romans. You can't talk about Cleopatra without talking about the Romans. But before we get there, I have to ask about this whole language thing. Was it really that uncommon for rulers back then to learn the local language?
You hit the nail on the head. It's something that often gets overlooked, but it speaks volumes about her understanding of, let's call it, soft power. You see, her predecessors, they were content with maintaining the status quo, a Greek elite, ruling over an Egyptian populace.
But not Cleopatra.
No, not Cleopatra. She understood that language equals power, especially in a kingdom as diverse and historically significant as Egypt. Imagine the trust she would have built, being able to converse with priests, scholars, even common people in their own tongue.
It completely changes the image of her, doesn't it? Not just a distant ruler, but someone who's in touch with the people she ruled.
Precisely. And she wasn't afraid to use every tool at her disposal: language, image, alliances. Speaking of image, let's talk about her coinage, because this is where things get really interesting.
Coinage, you mean like money. What's so special about her face on a coin?
Oh, it's so much more than just her face on a coin. It's about branding, about projecting an image. And remember, this is centuries before the concept of branding as we know it.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. What was she doing with her coinage? Was it like super fancy or something?
We're talking next-level image management here. On some of her coins, especially those intended for circulation in Roman territories, she actually chose to portray herself with more masculine features.
Now that's what I call bold. But why go for the masculine look?
It all comes down to understanding your audience and the message you want to convey. Cleopatra knew that in the Roman world, power was often associated with masculinity. By adopting a more androgynous look, she could project strength and authority to her Roman subjects.
It's like she was speaking a whole other language, but visually, through her coinage.
Exactly. It's a subtle but powerful form of propaganda, and it shows just how savvy she was when it came to shaping her image.
It makes you wonder how much of what we see, even today, from powerful figures, is carefully curated, right?
Now you're getting it.
Yeah.
And that leads us to another aspect of image making that played a crucial role in Cleopatra's story. The stories told about her, especially by, you guessed it, the Romans.
Okay, now this is where I think things get really juicy. Roman propaganda, here we come. So we left off talking about the Romans. I have a feeling they weren't exactly thrilled to have this powerful, intelligent, multilingual woman ruling a kingdom right next door.
You know, the Romans weren't exactly known for being open-minded, especially when it came to powerful women. And Cleopatra, well, let's just say she presented a bit of a challenge to their worldview.
Okay, I'm all ears. How so?
Well, they couldn't exactly deny her intelligence, right? I mean, the woman spoke like 9 languages, and strategically she was brilliant. But they also couldn't let her just, run circles around them.
Makes sense. So what did they do?
Propaganda, my friend. They went into overdrive, spreading stories designed to undermine her authority, to make her seem, shall we say, a little less threatening.
Okay, I knew we were getting to the juicy stuff. Give me an example. Hit me with your best Roman propaganda.
Oh, I've got a good one. Ever heard about Cleopatra dissolving a pearl in vinegar?
Wait, seriously, I think I vaguely remember that story. Something about proving a point to Mark Antony sounds a bit excessive, even for Cleopatra.
Exactly. And that's the point. The story was most likely fabricated, or at least heavily embellished, to paint her as extravagant, out of touch, maybe even a little crazy.
Aha, classic smear campaign.
You got it. They couldn't deny her political acumen, so they went after her character, portraying her as this seductive temptress who used men to get what she wanted.
Which, of course, ignores the very real political realities she was facing. She was trying to preserve her dynasty, her kingdom.
Exactly. And that brings us to those infamous relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. These weren't just love affairs. These were calculated alliances.
Okay, let's break this down because I think a lot of people miss that crucial point. So first, we've got Julius Caesar, the big guy himself.
And remember, he's at the height of his power, but he also needs allies. And Cleopatra, well, she's no fool. She sees an opportunity to secure her own position, to gain Caesar's support and protection.
And she bears him a son, Caesarion.
Caesarion, the ultimate symbol of their alliance, a direct link to Roman power. You can bet that didn't sit well with certain folks back in Rome.
But then, boom, Caesar is assassinated and things get really complicated.
Chaos in Rome, a power vacuum. And Cleopatra, she needs a new ally, fast. Enter Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man.
Another strategic move.
Absolutely. And don't forget, Antony is ambitious. He's got his own eyes on power, so their alliance, it's mutually beneficial. They need each other.
And they certainly weren't subtle about it, were they? Thinking about those lavish displays, the donations of Alexandria, that must have really ruffled some feathers.
Oh, you better believe it. Imagine Antony basically declaring Cleopatra and her children as rulers of various territories. That was the direct challenge to Octavian, Caesar's heir.
The future Emperor Augustus. Talk about a power play. But also, talk about setting yourself up for some serious conflict.
Because Octavian, he wasn't about to let that slide. And well, you know the rest. It all culminates in the Battle of Actium, a crushing defeat for Antony and Cleopatra.
And Egypt, as they say, becomes a Roman province. But even in defeat, even with this tragic end, Cleopatra's story doesn't end there, does it?
You're talking about her children. They're often overlooked, but their fates tell us so much about the lasting impact of Cleopatra's life. Her bloodline.
Especially Cleopatra Selene II, right? Because this is where things get really interesting. It's not just about the fall of a queen, it's about the rise of, well, another one.
Imagine the daughter of the last pharaoh of Egypt now ruling a kingdom in North Africa. It's a twist worthy of, well, any Hollywood movie about Cleopatra, but this is real history and it really happened.
It makes you think about how history isn't linear. There are these echoes, these ripples that extend far beyond a single lifetime.
And that's what makes Cleopatra so fascinating to study. She wasn't just queen. She was a mother, a diplomat, a survivor. And her story, well, it didn't end with her death. It continued through her children.
Okay, so we've talked about her strategic brilliance, the Roman propaganda machine that tried to tear her down. But what about her legacy? Why, thousands of years later, are we still so captivated by this Egyptian queen? It's a question for the ages, isn't it? What is it about Cleopatra that continues to fascinate us?
Well, for starters, she was a woman operating in a world dominated by men. And not just operating, but thriving. We're talking about a woman who challenged Rome, who held her own against some of the most powerful figures in history.
She was playing chess while they were playing checkers.
The perfect analogy. And she did it all with this incredible intellect, this charisma that people just couldn't ignore. It's no wonder she's become this larger-than-life figure.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing that I find so fascinating. The way she's been portrayed throughout history. Talk about a chameleon.
Oh, absolutely. We've got everything from those ancient Egyptian sculptures to Shakespeare's plays to, let's not forget, Elizabeth Taylor in that iconic movie. It's like every generation reinvents her in their own image.
It's true. She's like a blank canvas that we project our own ideas onto. To the Romans, she was a threat, a seductress who needed to be taken down. Shakespeare, he gave us this tragic heroine torn between love and duty. And then Hollywood, well, they went all out with the glamour and the intrigue.
And yet, despite all these different interpretations, there's something undeniably Cleopatra about her. It's almost like the more we learn, the more enigmatic she becomes.
That's the beauty of her story. She defies categorization. She was a queen, A mother, a diplomat, a warrior. She embraced different cultures, spoke, what was it, 9 languages? And in the end, she chose death over surrender.
She was determined to control her own narrative, even in death.
Precisely. And that brings us to something I wanted to touch on. We've been deep diving into her Wikipedia entry, right?
Mm.
And it's been a gold mine of information, but it's also made me realize that this is just the tip of the iceberg.
There's always more to uncover, isn't there?
Yeah.
Especially with someone like Cleopatra.
Exactly. So for our listeners out there, if you really want to understand Cleopatra, you've got to go beyond the surface. You've got to dig deeper, question the narratives you've been given.
Look for those hidden complexities, the nuances that make her story so compelling.
Because that's where you'll find the real Cleopatra, the brilliant, ambitious, flawed, utterly captivating queen who continues to fascinate us centuries later. And that's what makes history so fascinating, isn't it? It's not just dates and names, it's a conversation that continues across time. And Cleopatra, well, she'll always be a part of that conversation.
Absolutely. Well, that was an incredible deep dive. Thanks for taking us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.